Hello everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm ranking every single Pokemon from Temporal Forces, or not actually all of them, but all the ones that are good, and the single prizes. I ranked the EXs previously, and I also ranked the trainers slash special energy previously, so you can check out those videos after this one. They're pretty interesting, but I think this is the most interesting list. Admittedly, the single prizes are worse than the trainers or the EXs, but they are still pretty interesting, and some are really crazy. These are obviously based on my own opinions, but also what I've seen from other people. But let's just hop right into it. Also, all the images I believe are from Justin Basil's website. That is because they are proxies, so the attack names might be wrong, and parts of the card are actually in Japanese. But anyways, that doesn't matter too much for this. Let's just hop right in with number 25, Vikavolt. It's 160 HP. Its stats are like whatever. It is lightning type, and its attack your serial cannon for lightning. Lightning does 120 and 80 more damage for each Charger Bug on your bench. Charger Bug is the stage 1 to Vikavolt, but I feel like it's pretty obvious why this card isn't that good. It's a stage 2. Its damage output, if you just say 120 for 2, isn't particularly good. If you say 200 for 2, that's pretty okay. But, or actually, it's pretty decent, but that's really hard to do because it's a stage 2 and a stage 1 from that same evolution line. So you need to rare candy and then also not rare candy one. And then you need 2 energies, which is still a little awkward to get on. It is something you can do a few times in a game, like twice maybe. If you're lucky, you're hitting 200 twice. But it's obviously really awkward. There is no Zoroark from Evolving Skies that will be rotating. All these cards are coming with rotation. So Temporal Forces itself is coming with rotation, I should say. So yeah, it's not very good. Next up, 24, we have Sawbuck. This is one I could see a little higher, but so it says once during your turn, you can search your deck for a stadium, reveal and put it into your hand, then shuffle your deck. You do also have above average HP and I guess an above average attack. The main thing here obviously is the ability, and it's okay. I mean, I think stadiums just aren't so good post rotation though. They're not terrible by any means, but they're not game defining like they are pre rotation. Right now in pre rotation, Path to the Peak literally defines not every deck, but probably 2/3 of the like top decks because it shuts down a lot of abilities. It's really good, and obviously, if you don't have that, then that's not as good because it's rotating, and so less games will be played. The only reason you'd want this is if you run a bunch of different stadiums, but I don't know. It's pretty niche and obviously not that useful. Next up, number 23 here, we have Rabombi with business wages. I don't know if this is right in the translation, but anyways, it does 34 on colorless, but if the defending Pokemon is knocked out during your next turn, take 2 more prizes. This is kind of interesting, but to me the big issue is one, if it's already a 2 prizer, you should just knock it out now, take the 2, then take another KO next turn for another 2 more prizes. Obviously, you won't necessarily always be able to do that. This Rabombi also does have free retreat, which is kind of fun. But the big downside is obviously 30 damage is essentially nothing. It's not nothing, but it's not that impactful. But the big deal is that it's just hard to use, right? Like your opponent can switch out very easily, and they probably will. They obviously want to, and it's not that hard. Decks play some switching cards, but more importantly, most decks can just retreat. And well, it's a little awkward in a number of scenarios. You're certainly going to be okay with this, so they will be okay with it. You will not, because then you'll just be attacking it and having essentially no effect. Obviously with Rabombi though, it can be really good when it works, but I just think it's so rare to work. There's only one colorless on the stage 1, and potentially in some point in the future it could work if you were able to trap your opponent's Pokemon in the active or something like that, but right now I'm not a big fan. 22, we have Drillbur. Its ability here lets you search your deck, so it's an on-play ability. You can search your deck for up to 3 basic fighting energy and discard them, then shuffle your deck. This ability is actually directly worse than Shuckle from Forbidden Light. I don't remember the set, but anyways, this ability is pretty interesting, but also like kind of really niche. It can be played with the EX, which I've forgotten the name of, Garchomp EX. There we go. It can be used with Garchomp EX in certain scenarios where you want fighting energy in your discard, including Koraidon EX, the first one that came out. These scenarios are like it's very good in those scenarios. It's pretty good there. But those are pretty niche, and those decks aren't that good. You could argue putting this lower, and I wouldn't blame you, but the rest of them haven't been that good either. Next up, 21, we have Unfeasant. Its attack here. So this requires some context that we'll talk about later on in the video. And yeah, but anyways, so reverse wind here for 2 colorless. It does 70. You may put 2 energy from your opponent's active into their hand. So this is like disruptive and does some damage. You had to do a free retreat. You can do 180 for 3. I don't know. It's like not very good. The first attack, reverse wind, is potentially usable against certain decks and potentially really annoying to have to deal with. But for the most part, it's pretty bad. It's only here at 21 because of another card we'll talk about later. 20, we have Great Tusk, but this is not the milling Great Tusk. This is the other one. Does 160 if your bench Pokemon have any damage counters on them for fighting colorless, colorless. It's a little awkward to power up, and getting bench damage isn't like super hard, but it's not super easy either. And long story short, there's just a lot of conditions you have to meet here. It's a bunch of energy, a little awkward, and your damage output isn't insane or anything. And certainly high in it for a single prize or basic, but like, I don't know. It's obviously it's pretty awkward. Next up, number 19, we have Iron Valiant, and 18, we also have Iron Valiant. These are 2 different cards. The first one does Calculate, isn't very good, so set up attack, but not very powerful. Majestic Sword for a Psychic Colorless does 200 if you played a Future Supporter during your hand. You played a Future Supporter from your hand during your turn. This is obviously good, 200. It's pretty decent, but the issue is that the Future Supporters aren't that good, or at least not that synergistic with Iron Valiant. So that's a bit of a problem. And it kind of hit decent amounts of damage. There are a number of ways to boost this, but there isn't just a lot of synergy within the future package outside of the Pokemon. So, and specifically with the supporters. So I just don't think Iron Valiant's gonna quite get there. Yeah, and the 18 Iron Valiant, the first attack does 20 to the active, 20 to on your opponent's bench. It is usable. Then Zen Blade, Psychic Color, so you do 120. It does actually a little more. I think it's a little bit better, but they're pretty much the same. Next up, 17 here, we have Sabeye, Damage Collector for 2 colors. Move any number of damage counters from your opponent's bench to their active. This is kind of interesting, moving damage counters around. There was Tapu Lele, or actually 2 that did this. Well, 2 that were like the same but different. Anyway, there were some cards that did stuff like this, and it's kind of good because it lets you like move your opponent's damage counters around. But this case, it's only from in one direction, which is to their active, which is probably the Pokemon that already has damage counters on it anyways. This is usable in certain scenarios, but for the most part, it's not that good. It's very niche, and yeah, you can use it with double turbo, which is nice. Number 16, now we have P-Dove. This is the one that evolves into Unfeasant. This is 1 sting your turn. Its ability, Emergency Evolution. If this Pokemon's remaining HP is 30 or less, you may search your deck for an Unfeasant or Unfeasant EX and put it onto this Pokemon to evolve it, and then shuffle your deck. Obviously, the good thing is this lets you evolve immediately, and getting 20 damage counters on it is not that hard with this Stadium Gapejaw Bog, which will just put you down there. Or if your opponent, I guess, attacks you for 20, but that seems very strange because it's literally better for them probably not to attack you at all. But obviously, we talked about the Unfeasant. It wasn't very good. There's another one in Standard that is surviving rotation that also isn't that good. I think it's worse. And then presumably there's the idea that we're going to get an Unfeasant EX that'll be like better. I mean, EXs just tend to be better than single prizers, at least as of late. So I think that's the idea of why I have it up here. Honestly, I had this as high as like number 3 on my list, I think, because it's like if the Unfeasant EX is good, this card is absurdly good because it lets you just evolve turn 1. Not just evolve turn 1, but you do need a little bit of setup, but it's not that much setup. So I definitely think P-Dove is potentially really good, but obviously it's not really good on its own. It needs a good Pokemon to go into, so it's one to keep in mind, and I do think they're going to give us an Unfeasant EX, but I don't think it's confirmed. I think it's definitely possible that they don't, or more importantly, that they don't know yet, and so they're like, oh, in the future, if we have one, we want people to be able to go evolve into it, but we're not sure if we're going to do that. Next up, 15, I have Shaman. This for 1 grass does 60 to 1 of your opponent's bench Pokemon EX or Pokemon V. It does have free retreat as well. It's kind of a nice little like snipe option if you're playing like a Luminous box or something. It could be useful, I guess. I think it's kind of fun. Some people are talking about it with the Torterra EX deck, which I'm pretty excited for. And so it could be pretty nice there. Obviously, I don't know. There are a lot of different things going on with it that aren't like super good, but not terrible either. It's a 1 energy basic attack, which is nice. It's kind of like Sabeye. They're actually pretty similar. I do think Shaman's a little better. You could honestly play them together because you have this like spread aspect, and I think Shaman's okay. I mean, 60 for 1 is it's not terrible by any means. It's an attack that like you could play, not particularly good, but obviously grass isn't the best type. This isn't hitting weakness ever, and grass is good to hit weakness with, but this can't ever hit weakness. So yeah. Okay, sorry, they can hit weakness and expanded, but not standard. 14 here we have Whimsicott, uplifting heal on play. So when you evolve this, you may heal all damage from your active grass Pokemon and then discard all energy from that Pokemon. Obviously, you don't really want to discard the energy. This is like Cheryl, but it's on play on a stage 1, which is worse, almost definitely. I don't think this card is absolute trash, but I think it's a little awkward. Of course, essentially the only Pokemon to pair this with will be the new Torterra EX, which has high HP and only attacks for 1 energy and needs lots of grass Pokemon in play. But I don't think I'd play it in that deck, because you could heal with a card like Professor Toad's Scenario or potentially Collapse Stadium, although that has some issues with the deck. But I definitely think those are probably better than Whimsicott. Number 13, we have for Alligator. This one's really interesting. Its ability, Torrential Heart, says once during your turn, you may put 5 damage counter on this Pokemon. If you do attacks used by this Pokemon, you 20 more damage, or sorry, 120 more damage to your opponent's active before weaknesses and resistance. And your main attack here does 160 for 2 water and can't use this attack next turn, or your only attack, I guess, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. And so the idea is that you do 280 with this, and then that's like a really good damage amount to hit. And damaging on yourself 50 isn't horrible. Obviously, you'd rather not, but it's not like you're falling to some absurdly low HP. You'll only be at 130, and if you use it twice, you're at 80, which isn't like nothing. You could use it 3 times, and you won't get knocked out by yourself. So that's kind of nice. And then, I mean, it's just really good. And then there's the pre-evolution attacks, and there are some ways to use that with this Pokemon, or one way that we'll talk about. And so it'll let you copy the previous evolution's attack and the basic, most importantly, because the stage 1, if you want to copy that, you can't rare candy. But the basic, it just does 10, but I mean, it's 1 energy. It also stops him from retreating, and so that'll be doing 130 for 1 energy on a stage 2, which is pretty decent. Number 12 here, we do have Relic Can. Then this one says each year evolved Pokemon can use any attacks from its previous evolutions. You still need the necessary energy. This is really nice. It's really fun. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a lot of good combos. For Alligator is honestly one of the best ones, but I think in the future it has potential to be really cool. I think it's right now kind of interesting, but the best combo in my opinion is maybe an Arceus Giratina. It's really good. It's pretty decent in that deck. It's pretty interesting with, in my opinion, Regieleki v Max, and there are some things, but it is what it is. But potentially it could become really absurd as well, and expanded. It's just good. This is a standard list, but an expanded is cool. Number 11 here now we have Rapsa. Its ability, Spherical Shield, prevent all damage from and effects of attacks done to your opponent's bench. Done to your bench Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. This does not stop abilities or other things like supporters, I guess. But obviously the good thing here is it's like stopping, it acts like Jirachi and Manaphy and potentially a little bit more, stopping Sabeye and Radiant Ninja's attacks, and I was going to say Rapsa Digression through VMAX. That's rotating, but it stops a few things, and it's pretty interesting. I don't think it's that good, but I definitely think it's interesting and playable. I think people will play this. I don't think it's that good, to be honest. I'm just going to say that, but if you do, just go ahead and play it. This attack's usable as well, I guess, if you are like somehow playing a few grass energy, and it is what it is. But I think the ability is pretty interesting. I'd rather play just one Manaphy and probably not worry about Sabeye too much, because Sabeye is good, but it's not like hitting you the whole game or anything. But anyway, Rapsa is pretty good, though. It walls both Sabeye and those regular bench snipers as well. Next up, number 10, we have Bronzong with Evolution Jammer, 30 for 1 Psychic on a stage 1, although there is a supporter to get this in play turn 1. But then you stop your opponent from evolving any of their Pokemon. Obviously, this stops evolution decks, including rare candies, so your opponent can't rare candy, which is such a huge deal, because, I mean, Charizard DX is just kind of, it's not going to be good for Charizard if you pull this off turn 1. I think, or like before they're able to evolve their Charizard. So I think this is potentially really good. but against like other things, it's kind of useless, right? If you're against the Lost Zone, this like is just terrible. But against certain decks, it literally just wins you the game. Or specifically Charizard, that's probably the main deck, but Charizard's really good post rotation. So yeah, Bronzong is potentially really good, potentially kind of not so good in certain matchups. I think Bronzong with Bayonet EX could be really good, but also it's a little. I'm not sure. I'm not fully convinced on it yet either. Next up, number 9, we have Bregast. This one might be a little bit of a hot take, but its ability Weedy Resilience. For each prize your opponent's taken, it gets 50 more HP. So, like, halfway through the game, it's at 250 on a single prizer, which is just absurd. And then your really powerful needles for Grass Colorless 80 for each. You flip coin for each energy attaches Pokemon, does 80 for each heads. I mean, like, what's going on here, right? Like, obviously really big damage and potentially, but it's kind of luck based, and it's a really weird card, but obviously can get really high HP, which I really like. I think the HP is like the big selling point here. And also you can pair it with Fortress EXs. I guess kind of good with that, but kind of silly. I'm definitely gonna play it. I think it'll be really funny, and I'm just looking forward to seeing how that goes. Number 8 here we have Chino or whatever. Its ability special roll for 2 colors on stage 1 to 70 for each special energy card attaches Pokemon, so double turbo is just 1 card. So you'll be hitting 50 more damage because damage reduction, all that good stuff. But obviously the idea here is it's good with Lugia V-Star, and specifically Archeops, and it is good there. I'm not a massive fan of that deck. I do know it won a major tournament in Japan, which is like meaningful, but it's not. It doesn't mean everything. I mean, it means that the deck can win a major tournament because it did, but doesn't mean I don't think it's the best. I think it's somewhere near the top. I think it's top 5 or top 10. And the Chino is a big part of why, because it does hit really good damage, but it is only good in that deck, and it's not like game breaking in that deck either. There are a number of other attackers. It's an evolution in a deck that needs a bunch of other evolutions as well, so it's kind of awkward to set up. Is it good when it gets into play? Yes. Is it broken? No. I think it's pretty decent though. Number 7 here, we have the Dunspars. Yeah, I was like, did I do the right number of does? And I did. The Dunspars, dashing draw. Once during your turn, you may draw up to 3 cards. If you do shuffle this Pokemon, all attached cards into your deck. The idea here is that it does draw you more than Kirlia, so late game it's really good. If you get like Ionode, in pretty much every other scenario, it's like worse than Kirlia might. Well, it does have more HP as well. It can act as a pivot. It has certain use cases and is like a fun little card. I'm not super convinced, but I know some people are really in love with this card. I think it's pretty fun, pretty silly, I guess, but good. It's not like silly bad. It's silly good. Keep in mind that you obviously need to get into play, and it's not a dedicated engine, but it's pretty decent. I mean, if it was Kirlia or Babero level good, or like Liepard even, Liepard's pretty much the same as Kirlia, then it would be, but definitely the best single person in the set. It's not as good as those, but it's still pretty good. Next up, we have Matang, a metal Pokemon with its ability Metal Maker. Once you turn, you may look at the top 4 cards of your deck and attach any number of basic metal energy you find there to your Pokemon in any way you like. Then shuffle the other cards and put them on the bottom of your deck. This is very similar to the Magnezone from Astral Radiance, I think, is the card, and you compare this with most notably Adalga V-Star. You compare it with other metal Pokemon as well. There's a Zamazenta. I don't know. There are a few cards. There's a Goldengo from Paradox Rift or something. I don't remember. There's some like Goldengo that you could pair with. It's not that good, but the really good thing is with Delta V-Star, and this is more consistent than Magnezone, or at least takes less commitment in the form of you don't need Rare Candy or 2 turns to evolve it. Or like 3 turns to evolve, I guess. But yeah, so Matang is pretty interesting. I definitely don't think it's like a broken card because it's high in consistency. I've never been a big fan of decks that play massive amounts of energy, or that just, if you don't play massive amounts, you're just going to be hitting an average of like 0.6 energy every time or something, which is just not a lot of value. But it's not terrible, but it's not that good. But then I think Matang has potential. Certainly, I'm not a massive believer in it, but I know some people are, and I mean, Dalkin V-Star is really powerful, and if you can ever get it powered up, that's kind of the point. Like, if you get it powered up, you win, and if you don't, you lose, and that's about it. And this is one of the best ways we've seen to power it up, arguably the best way, certainly the most straightforward way we've seen to power it up ever, so I think it has a lot of potential to be pretty good. Number 5 here, we have Maridon. Number 4, we have Roaring Moon. These are the 2 Ancient Box Pokemon. You can read them here, but this one does 30 for each Ancient Pokemon in play. So for fighting colorless up to 180, and then Roaring Moon. So Fluttermane's number 3. I'll say that as well. But Roaring Moon here, Vengeful Feathers, 70, 10 more for each Ancient card in your discard for 2 Darkness. And then you do have Fluttermane, which turns off your opponent's active Pokemon's abilities, and it does have a usable attack. Nothing particularly amazing, but it'll get the job done, hopefully. Certainly if you're walling him a lot. But the idea here is to use Roaring Moon and Maridon, mix in Fluttermane as well to really annoy your opponent, especially if they're running Lost Zone. And so you can go with Maridon and Roaring Moon, though, as your main attackers. They're very similar. Maridon's pretty decent, but the big issue is like you can't really play engines, and if you're not hitting 180, like if you're hitting 120, that's really underwhelming. Roaring Moon here can hit big damage late game, but its multiplier is really low. I mean, just 10 times, but I think Roaring Moon is kind of interesting. I'm not a massive believer in the deck. It's just like a you've got this type of deck, but like you've got this, you can just go ahead and it'll work out type of deck. But I think it's a deck that has potential. I think it's a lot like Mad Party or I don't know. It's definitely like a traditional single prize deck that is a little like gambly because you do run Pokestop and you need to get a little lucky. But it's a traditional, I guess, basic single prize deck. And so that's kind of fun. I'm not a massive fan of it because I don't think it has the biggest staying power in the late game if you like burn a lot of resources early game, and if you obviously miss your resources early game, then that's just not good. So I think it's kind of like Maridon EX in that aspect as well, but it is obviously a single prizer. But I do think it's pretty decent. I think the deck has a lot of potential. And speaking of Fluttermane as well, which I mentioned, is if it's in the active, your opponent's active has no abilities, really good against Sabeye, or sorry, not Sabeye, against Lost Zone and Comfy, which will hurt Sabeye and will hurt Guillotine to V-Star, and it will turn off Cramorant's ability, which is bad for that. It also turns off like all sorts of random things. I mean, if your opponent has Charizard in the active, you're like, oh no, or Charmander, I guess, evolving into Charizard. Then you're like, no, I'm stopping that. Same thing with Arceus V-Star. There are a number of different use cases, and I think it's pretty interesting. It's a little annoying to have to deal with, and I think it's very annoying. We've seen Empoleon V, Tinglu EX, Klefki. I think we've seen some other ones as well, and in my opinion, Fluttermane's like definitely the best. So I think it's definitely going to see some play and be pretty decent. Also, you can play in Gardevoir. Number 2 here, we have Maridon. Maridon, obviously, it's a future Pokemon, as you can see, and it's really good at accelerating to other future Pokemon. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It just does its thing, which is like accelerate. You can boost its damage to take care of single prizes. You can attack with Sparking Strike potentially if your opponent isn't going after Maridon. I mean, it's really good. In my opinion, I think it's not as good as Iron Crown EX, which I do think is arguably the best card in the set, but it works well with that, and the two are very important to each other. And I think Maridon will see play. I don't know if it'll see a ton of success, but I think it'll see a lot of play and have like it is very important to the future type. The future Pokemon, a lot of them are kind of energy needy. Maridon obviously will help with that. Won't like give them everything they need all the time, but for the most part, it's pretty good. And yeah, really cool card. And number 1, I have Great Tusk with Ground Collapse. Discard the top card of your opponent's deck. But if you played an Ancient Sporty, you discard the top 3. I talked about this on the podcast with Uncommon Fossil, I think yesterday. I don't know. It might have been 2 days ago. I'm recording this. I think it was. I'm recording this on the day I'm releasing the podcast. But yeah, my upload schedule always gets weird. Anyways, Ground Collapse is really good. Mill 4 for 2 colorless. It obviously isn't just that easy, but it's pretty close to that easy. It's the best mill card I think I've ever seen, and certainly okay, I haven't played like the whole TCG, but it's the best mill card since the original Durant, in my opinion, or I think it's better than the original Durant. But that's like the first one I'm particularly aware of that was like just a straight up mill Pokemon. I know there were some before it, and I'm not super familiar with all of them. But yeah, Great Tusk is really good because it mills 4. It's really good. So yeah, there are counters to it and stuff like that, but it's really difficult to deal with. And Control is really good, so you can pair this with Control. You could pair it with Stall. I personally wouldn't do that, but you could. But yeah, anyway, Great Tusk is it's great. It's in the name. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell, sharing, commenting. Did I say that? Definitely comment. I'm interested to hear your thoughts as well. If I missed anything, sorry about that. Blame Justin Basil. No. Yeah, I don't think I missed any Pokemon that were particularly important, but if I did, comment that down below as well. There was an Excadrill I didn't talk about, but it's not that good. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I'm excited to see you next time.